Friends, welcome to another video. My name is Alyssa and this is Dreaming of the Farm. Today I'm talking about sourdough bread. I have to shout out my dear and darling friend Kelly, who set me up with the most amazing starter and who sent me home with it after a play date with no questions asked. She has guided me through this and it's definitely something that takes a little practice. So to begin making sourdough, you're going to need some sourdough starter and some discard and a scale that can measure in grams. To feed your starter, you do equal parts. So that's the sourdough discard right there. Equal parts of discard, water, and flour. On this day, I was making 3 loaves of bread. So that's why we're doing so much starter at 105 grams. So you can see I'm adding water to it. I reset my scale and next I'll add my flour. I like to use unbleached bread flour and the ARNOLD brand is the best in my opinion. After you have equal parts of your sourdough discard, your water at room temperature, and your flour, you're going to give it a really good mix until it looks like pancake batter. My technique is to go around the edges, give it a really great scrape, and then poke it in the middle. Again, it will look like pancake batter. After you have mixed it well, you will cover it. I like to leave a little room for ventilation, and your sourdough starter, after it's been fed, should sit anywhere from 4 to 12 hours. This will take a little trial and error because you'll really need to learn your environment. The sweet spot for me is 10 hours. After 10 hours, the sourdough starter has rised by about 3 times. It's nice and bubbly, it's nice and stretchy, and it's got a really nice sour smell to it. And that's how I know that it is time for me to go ahead and make my bread. And while we're kind of in a lull here, go ahead and like and comment on this video and subscribe to my channel where I share motherhood, home decor, and lifestyle. All right, so back to the bread. So this is about 10 hours after I fed my starter. And I'm going to start making my dough here. The recipe I follow calls for 50 grams of awakened starter. So I'm doing this in 3s because I'm making 3 loaves of bread. Sometimes you will have to scoop extra out because you'll overfeed or overfull. And that's where the scale comes in handy. So 50 grams of starter. And it's a little tricky to work with. It takes a little practice, and I do recommend the rubber spatulas for that. So I have my scale there, and my starter's in the bowl, and you're going to add water. So I like to heat my water in a kettle. I add 325 grams of water. Again, if you go over the amount, you can easily scoop it out. And I try to be as exact as possible to my recipe. I'll link all of this down below for you. And then you're going to add your salt after you've added the water. I usually add in between 10 to 15 grams of salt. You're going to mix these 3 things together. You want to really try and separate that starter. Let the salt dissolve a little bit, and it should look like this. A good way to tell is that your starter will float. And then you're going to add 500 grams of flour. So once your 4 ingredients have been mixed in, again, that's 50 grams of starter, 325 grams of warm water, 12-ish grams of kosher sea salt, and then 500 grams of the bread flour. You're going to mix it all up. And it's going to be stringy, it's going to be messy, it's not going to be pretty. So you want to do the best you can to just really make sure that stuff is incorporated, but you really don't have to overmix it. The good thing about sourdough bread is that it is easy. It kind of does the work for you. There's not as much kneading involved, and as that gluten begins to grow, it will start to look a little bit prettier and smoother. So after you mix, you're going to let the bread rest, you're going to cover it, and it's going to sleep for about an hour. So there's all my little 3 breads, and so this is 1 hour later. My hands are a little bit wet, so it's easier to work with, and you're going to do your first rounds of stretch and folds. When I first started making sourdough bread, I would take the whole dough out of my bowl and do it on my counter, but I don't really feel like wiping my counter that much, so I just do it inside the bowl, and I'm stretching it, I'm pulling it out, and then I'm pushing it back into the middle. I do this anywhere from like 6 to 10 times. It really depends on the preference of the bread and how you like to eat it and how it feels to you. And as you can see, it's looking more like pizza dough here, and you can kind of pat it all in, and then we're going to have it rest for another hour. So after it rests for another hour, you repeat that, and then you have it rest overnight. So the clips you're seeing now are the next morning. So that's my dough the following morning after 2 times of those stretch and fold. So again, that's 2 times that I stretched and folded it before I put it to bed for the night. So I'm getting things ready now to form my dough and bake. You just saw the wax paper. You're seeing me use regular old baking flour here, putting some flour on my counter so that I can form my dough. And that yellow scraper spatula thing is how I get my bread out of my bowl, because it can be a little bit tacky and a little bit stretchy. I will say there are some days where my bread will just fall out by itself. I'm always really proud when that happens, but when I'm a little bit crunched for time, I'll just use the scrapers here. And again, I'm going to link all of my goodies in the video notes below. So you can see the top of the bread was dry and the bottom of the bread was sticky. So I'm just kind of using the flour to help make the bread less sticky, and using my hands to kind of work out any of the bread that's a little bit more calloused or dry. This is really fun. You can kind of flip it back and forth. You want to stretch it and just kind of spread it out as wide. You'll usually feel like little air bubbles coming out, and you can just, it's really therapeutic. I really love this part of it. So there's 2 different ways that I form my bread. After you stretch it out, you can do the circle method, which is this method. So you kind of like pull from the sides and kind of make it into a bowl, flip it over, and then you kind of twist and pull towards you on the counter. So you keep forming it and shaping it into a cute little circle and squishing it in, and then kind of pulling it in so that the bottom kind of can flatten out and look a little bit pretty. And you can see a few bubbles here, and I'm just continuing to add that flour. You're going to put your wax paper down into the bowl. I used to clean the bowl before I did that. I don't do it anymore. Less steps is easier. And in the wax paper, you're going to let your bread take one final rest, and you're going to cover it, and you are going to put it to the side. So my oven is preheating while I do this with my Dutch oven inside with the lid on, and the temperature we're going to be baking the bread at is 450 degrees. So I'm going to share with you my other method for forming my dough. So this one is like I like to call it the diving board method. That's just a word I call it. So it's kind of more like a pastry, and you spread the bread out and then fold it in 3s, and then it's kind of similar as before, where you tuck and roll and pull towards you. I have to say I like the round better, because I usually get like a little flappy guy. It still looks pretty. It still gives your sourdough like a cute ear, but the circle method is more my go-to. So for the last time, I'm going to show you guys again how I do it. I always feel like it's helpful to see things in 3. Like I was rewinding a lot of the videos when I was learning how to do this. So I hope you find this helpful. And this was just a day I was making 3 loaves, so it worked out well. And you always want to like have a little bit of flour on top so that it's nice and good. Okay, so back to the starter. Again, repeating is good. So I am taking the sourdough discard from that big 105 grams I did the day before, and I'll do a smaller amount of feeding this time, about 50 grams. And so it's sourdough discard, adding in my room temperature water, and then adding in my bread flour. So simple, just equal parts. Give it a good mix, and it just kind of like lives on your counter. And I've done it in the fridge too. Like, you don't have to be burdened with this. You can have it be simple. It really just depends how often you're making bread. I usually make like a loaf a day, either for like myself, my parents, or my friends. Um, it doesn't become like a big hassle. You should feed it every 24 hours, but you can stretch it a little bit longer. It's very forgiving. So now it's time to score our bread. I'm using a ceramic knife to do this. I'm not the best at scoring. I'm really working on it. My bread is still like a little sticky. I'm still kind of new in this process, but the way I like to score my bread is by making an X, because it's nice and simple. I find the ceramic knife to work best, although I have tried the razor. So that's my preheated Dutch oven, and I put the bread in with the wax paper in. I bake it at 450 for 30 minutes covered, and then I take the lid off and I bake it for another 4 minutes uncovered. So you can leave it in a few extra minutes if you like your bread to be darker, but my kids prefer it to not be dark. So usually we have it a little more undercooked. And this is how cute it looks. My little X kind of looks like a cross when it bakes, and you can see the nice flour, and it has a really nice sound and crunch to it. So that pretty much wraps up this video. I'll most likely make a part 2 for the parts I could have elaborated on. And if you have any questions, just leave me a comment or send me a message on Instagram. This is a fun conversation for me, so feel free to ask all the questions, because I know I've been asking many. All right, if you haven't already, like and comment and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye, my friends. Evelyn, what do you think? Is that sourdough? Can you say sourdough?